My name is Billy. The Christmas dinner at my parents' house this year was a disaster that I'll never forget. It all started when my cousin Lily, who works in finance, casually mentioned during dinner that I was a multimillionaire. The moment she said it, the table fell into an eerie silence. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth, and my father slowly put down his glass, as if any sudden movement would shatter the tense atmosphere. My brother Jake just stared at me, his face a mix of confusion, disbelief, and then something darker. "What is she talking about?" he blurted out, not really a question. Before I could say anything, Lily started explaining, stuttering through the details of the Business Journal article that had featured me and my company, valued at $25 million. Each word hit Jake like a punch. His hands began to shake, and then, out of nowhere, he stood up so quickly that his chair toppled backward, and he collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. "10 million, he gasped between sobs, looking up at me as if I'd personally robbed him. "You owe me at least 10 million. You watched me struggle and fail while you sat on all this wealth." My mother immediately jumped to her feet and turned towards me, her voice rising into a raw and furious scream. "You stole his future. How could you be so heartless to your own brother?" I sat there, completely still, the old china vase on the table trembling slightly from Jake's outburst. My father just stared at his plate, as if it held the answers. 25 years of silent compliance finally cracked open right in front of everyone I loved. I left that night without finishing my dinner, without saying goodbye, and without responding to my mother's echoing voice in the hallway. Driving home in silence, I kept replaying Jake's sobs in my mind. The next morning, the calls started. My mother's voice was now softer, almost pleading, saying that Jake hadn't slept, that he was humiliated, and that I should help him since I could clearly afford it. My father, more composed but just as insistent, said that family takes care of family, and $10 million was nothing compared to my company's value. Jake's voicemail alternated between guilt-tripping and rage, claiming that I owed him for all the years I'd pretended to be broke while secretly succeeding. I didn't respond for 4 days. It wasn't out of cruelty, I just didn't know what to say to people who had spent decades taking my success for granted the moment it became visible. On the 5th day, my aunt called to tell me that the whole extended family had heard the story, and it had been twisted into something even uglier. They said I was selfish, cold, and ungrateful for all my parents' so-called sacrifices. That word, sacrifices, was the last straw. You see, 2 years ago, my father's antique shop was on the verge of foreclosure. He'd taken out a business loan against the house after a bad year in sales, and the payments had spiraled out of control. He never told anyone outside the bank. I found out because I still had access to an old joint account that no one had bothered to close. I noticed the overdraft notices piling up. Without asking questions, I set up an LLC through my accountant, completely separate from my name, and started covering the shortfall every month. I did it quietly and automatically, so my parents would never know how close they'd come to losing everything. A year later, when Jake's mortgage payments started to slip after a failed stock investment, I did the same for him. I routed partial payments through the same anonymous entity to prevent the bank from declaring a default. I only told my lawyer about it. I didn't want any credit because I'd learned long ago that in this family, helping others doesn't earn you gratitude, it earns you demands. So, when my mother accused me of stealing Jake's future and Jake demanded $10 million like it was a debt I'd been avoiding, something in me snapped. The next morning, I called my accountant and told her to stop all the transfers immediately. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. I just waited. About 5 weeks later, Jake's mortgage lender sent a notice of pending default. My father's shop loan, no longer being subsidized, fell 2 payments behind, and the bank called him directly. My mother phoned me in a panic, asking if I knew anyone in banking who could help. She had no idea that the anonymous support they'd been relying on for 2 years had been me, and it was now gone. I told her the whole truth, about the LLC, the shop, Jake's mortgage, and the 2 years of silent support while they'd called me selfish at every family gathering I'd missed because I was too busy building my company. There was a long pause on the phone, the kind where you can hear someone re-evaluating everything they thought they knew. A week later, my father called. For the first time in my adult life, he didn't ask me for anything. He just said he was sorry, that he hadn't known, and that he should have asked more questions before believing the worst of me. Jake never called directly, but I heard through my mother that he was furious again because the safety net he never knew existed was gone. I didn't give them the $10 million, and I didn't restart the anonymous payments. Instead, I sat down with my father and helped him refinance the shop loan properly, with his name on it and terms he could understand and meet. I also offered Jake a chance to have a real conversation about financial responsibility, but he hasn't taken me up on it yet. Maybe he will someday. What I've learned is that love without boundaries is not love, it's just exploitation. I spent years being invisible, helping people who only valued me when they thought I had nothing. I'm done being invisible now. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been the quiet one in a family that only sees you when they need something, hit subscribe and stay with me. There are more stories like this one coming, and I think you'll want to be here for them.